Candace Stewart, and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Trade Secrets. I've got my wonderful videographer, Nader, and Keith Munson, my trusty Steve, doing the audio. Today, our guest is Ryan Ulyate. Am I saying your name right?
No, it's Ulyate, like dull date.
Ulyate? All these years I
Ulyate.
fucked it up.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, yeah. Ryan is a producer, engineer, musician, bon vivant. Also a member of the incredible wine club, Vin Audio.
That's right.
Of which I count myself lucky to be a member. So, Ryan, it's pretty unscripted. I just, like I said, I start with one question. It's, where were you born?
I was born in Santa Monica, California.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was local boy.
Wow. What'd your mom and dad do?
My dad was a clarinet and saxophone player and played in the 20th Century Fox Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
With,
so union guy too, yeah?
Yeah, and played Alfred Newman and all those guys. Played on all the big Fox movies from like 1949 to like 1970.
What was your father's first name?
Bill.
Okay.
William. Yeah,
William.
Bill Ulyate. And he also had a big band with my Uncle Lloyd, Lloyd Ulyate is a trombone player who also played on all sorts of movies, played all with John, all the Star Wars movies and everything. And they had a big band together.
Oh, I love it.
Called the Elliott Brothers. Because
one could say Ulyate.
They started with the Ulyate Brothers, and it's like, it didn't work out. So
nice. Nice.
They called themselves the Elliott Brothers, and they had a gig. They were a big band in the early, late in the 40s and the 50s.
Wow.
And, they had a deal on MGM Records.
Wow.
They had some great music, and then
Do you have any of those recordings?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. There's somebody who's online who's taking them and transcribing all these old 78s.
Oh.
And like there's this whole library now of Elliott Brothers
wow.
stuff. And then they got the gig at Disneyland. When Disneyland opened in 54, 55.
Yeah.
They got the gig to be the house band at this place called the Plaza Gardens, which was this bandstand they built off of Main Street. And
wow.
So I kind of had a crazy life.
How fun is that? So did you grow up in Santa Monica?
We grew up, my dad, we started out in Mar Vista.
Oh, nice.
Then my dad built a house on Trancas Beach in Malibu.
Oh, thank you, Dad.
In 1958.
Holy crap.
Bought the lot for $15,000.
Oh, my God. What happened to that house?
The house eventually got sold to Carl Betts. We sold it to Carl Betts in 1964. Carl Betts was the dad on the Donna Reed show.
Oh, I love that.
Ancient people out there.
What did your mom do? She's a mom.
My mom was a housewife. She was just. I had three older sisters.
I was gonna say, do you have any siblings?
Yeah, and she was PTA president. You're
the youngest and only boy.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest and only girl. Makes you precocious, is all I'm saying.
It was a great slot for me because that by that time they'd given up on discipline.
I was going to say my parents were worn out too. I mean, it's so funny, and your sisters have already paved the way. You know what I mean? As far as during that time frame, I'm sure all of us are the same. And the musical influences of our older siblings influencing us and things like that.
I mean, that to me, my older siblings. I remember at one point they said, there's this new band from England and we have to see them.
Oh, my God.
And we turned on the TV and we watched the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan show.
I remember that. I was only 5, but I remember that very distinctly.
I mean, it's like just seared in my brain.
I know, same.
Yeah.
My mom used to make me twist at parties in front of her friends. She'd put on like the Beatles. Now that would be abuse, but it was fun.
Yeah.
So this is super cool. Where did you go to elementary school?
I went to elementary school in Malibu at Juan Cabrillo.
Oh, okay.
Well, then we moved to West LA because of the commute.
Pretty secluded Malibu, to be honest.
What?
Pretty secluded in Malibu. Yeah, it's not like hub of urban activity.
No, and the commute got to my dad, so we moved closer. So we moved to Westwood.
Oh, nice.
And then I went to the elementary school called Fairburn.
Oh.
And then a middle school called Emerson.
Oh, okay.
And then was going to go. Then my dad passed away suddenly, really tragically.
Oh.
And
how old were you when your dad passed?
13.
Oh, yeah, I was 15 when my dad died. I know it's changing. It's a life-changing event.
Yeah, and it's really funny because he was such a huge musical influence.
Right.
And I really had always been messing around with tape recorders.
I was going to ask if you played an instrument.
Well, what I did is I discovered my dad had this mono tape recorder. I discovered it in the closet when I was like 6 years old.
Was it like a Stevens or what?
It was a Revere. No, yeah, Revere or Revere. And I actually have
I've ever
one.
heard of that.
And it's 7-inch reels, reel to reel, mono.
Right. But flat or vertical?
Well, no, flat.
Yeah.
You kind of you kind of put it down like that.
Oh.
And I'd started recording with it, and my sisters had a singing group, and they sang for some friends at our house, and I recorded it the first time when I was, I'd like maybe 7 or something like that.
How old were you?
Really young.
Yeah.
And I remember listening back to it, and there was this funny kind of, static or whatever. And I realized I was so nervous when I was recording. I was subconsciously scratching the microphone.
Oh, funny!
So I learned my first thing in recording:
what not to do.
Don't scratch the microphone.
Yeah, I didn't mention when I introduced Ryan that he had been most recently Tom Petty's co-producer and engineer for the past, before Tom passed and after, putting together all kinds of posthumous stuff for Tom. But we're going to get there. First, we're going to get him out of high school. So what high school, Ryan?
Then we went down to Corona Del Mar High School.
Oh, nice.
Down in Newport
Dad's
Beach. My mom
around.
and I moved down there. And that's when I started getting into my garage band phase, and I started playing drums and,
Orange County,
and bass and then got a better tape recorder. So I kind of got into a garage band.
Oh, nice.
Started playing.
What was the name of that band?
Well, the first name of it was Rock On.
I love that.
But then we got into Emerson, Lake and Palmer and prog rock, right? And then and there's 3 of us, so we changed our name to Trilogy.
Trilogy.
Right on.
I
mean, oh God, they were so bad.
Did you gig? Did you gig around the area?
Yeah, we did junior high school dances.
Nice.
And on one of them, it was really funny. We did this dance, and I was into my Who face, so I showed up in the complete white jumpsuit like Pete Townsend. And
mine's really tall.
And
too.
we were. I remember we were smashing tambourines and shit. And,
oh my God!
And at some point, the kids went nuts. They tore the place down. It was like this great kind of the power of rock and roll.
Yeah, people don't really. I think people, if they don't know that much about the Who, one of my favorite bands of all time, but they would incite like riotous reaction, and Pete Townsend, I mean, hopefully Ryan didn't ruin his friend didn't ruin his one good guitar, because probably in high school he didn't have a bunch of guitars that you could break.
No, like I said, we had some sacrificial percussion instruments.
Yeah, tambourine.
We were gonna do the guitar.
Yeah, tambourine. There you go.
A really funny story though is that I knew somebody whose mother who was on the board or at the school, and I remember. This was years later, and somehow she was at a gathering, and she goes, "Oh yeah, we used to have rock and roll. We used to have dances for the kids at the school, but we stopped it after this one band showed up."
And it was your band?
Yes.
Oh my God!
So that's my claim to fame. I shut down
you shut down the live music program at the high school. So junior high, and then high school in Corona Del Mar, garage bands.
Yep.
Did you go to college right away, or?
Well, then what happened was I got out of high school, and my older sister had bought a house up in Enumclaw, Washington, which is like this. It's towards the Cascades. It's a little south of Seattle.
Nice.
And so it's up trees and everything. And
beautiful.
She bought this house, and she had this funky trailer in the back of it. So I rented the funky trailer. The funky trailer had a shed. I turned the shed into a studio. And my mom, for my graduation, my mom bought me a TIAC 3340S 4-track with simul-sync.
Nice.
So I got some old keyboards of my dad's from his band, and I just I put a studio together, started writing music, started making my own little recordings.
Oh, very cool.
And then the college I went to had a performing arts
in Washington?
Yeah, it was Green River Community College.
Nice.
And it had a performing arts class, the division. And I started writing music for all the plays that they were doing.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, and then I started writing original music, and then we did this play called Yankee Doodles, which was because it was a bicentennial. It was 76.
Right, 76.
So I wrote all the music. I became the musical director.
That's the year I got out of high school.
Oh, really?
And I went to Washington, D.C. with my mom. Yeah, cool.
Wow.
Yeah, 76. Good year. Good year for music.
Good year for music. And then we toured it all around
Yankee
Washington.
Doodles?
In the summer of 76, we toured Yankee Doodles in Washington State, Oregon, and Northern California.
Oh, fun.
And went on the road with it.
Oh, fun.
And these were tunes where the guy who was the director, Gary Taylor, he wrote the script and he wrote the lyrics, and then I wrote the music for all the songs in this musical.
This was a good time in America because the Vietnam War was ending and hippies were around and things were very. I think they were positive at that point.
Totally.
Things had calmed down a bit.
Yeah, and then I just went ahead and I recorded. Then I went back and I recorded all those songs really professionally, in my studio, and got everything right and made this amazing cassette tape. And I thought, man, I'm going to go to LA with this. Yeah. And they're just going to see
Hollywood.
Yeah, they're just going to see I'm going to get a job in a studio with this tape, and they're going to think, wow, this guy is so great,
I know you, so I happen to know where you work, but we want the audience to hear. So you come to LA, you got your reel in your cassette. By the way, they're bringing cassettes back. Did you know that?
I think they should.
I think they should too. They sound great. But and they might start putting cassette players in cars again. How fun would that be? Anyway, so where did you apply for a job?
Well, I just hit the street.
Yeah.
I hit every studio because that's the way you did it back then.
Yeah.
You just knocked
Still
on the door.
Still the way you do it, by the way.
Yeah, you just, you find every studio. And so I went to every studio and, and then I said, and here's my tape, and they're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
I'll throw it in the
I know.
pile,
those of you who are listening, when you want to get a job at a studio, not to sound, harsh or whatever, but I don't care about your reel. I don't care what you've recorded. I'm glad you have. I'm happy to know, but yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
But because I think probably, you were rare. We didn't really have recording schools at that time, and you were rare that you'd gotten some hands-on experience with a tape machine and stuff like that. So I imagine someone would have snatched you up as an intern or a runner.
Yeah. But still it was rough. There was just a lot of people, and I wasn't having any luck. And it's funny, I still at that point had all my stuff still up in Washington, in Washington State.
Right.
And I was kind of halfway there and halfway in LA. And I just said to myself, if you're going to do it, you got to just go all in. So I just said, okay, nothing much was happening, but I realized that for some reason, I just realized I had to just make the commitment. So
move here.
So I got all my stuff, right?
Wow.
Was
your mama still living down here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got all my stuff and drove it back. I got a U-Haul and threw it there and then drove all my studio back. And the day I unloaded all my stuff at my friend's house who I was staying with, I did a follow-up call to this one studio, and she said, get down here right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
This was Roz.
Oh,
nice. Who was the one who ran the studio, and she said, get down here right now.
Was that George Tobin's?
Yeah. So that's
I let it out the bag.
So that's what happened. So I got in there.
Tobin was a producer in his own right, engineer in his own right. People would know him for many things, but one of the things maybe was Tiffany, the artist Tiffany that he developed. But I used to steal a lot of my assistants because I worked at what is now Glenwood Place. It was called Take One for my brother Steve. It was my first gig. And I would steal the assistants. Tobin always had great assistants. I never stole Ryan because he'd already probably launched by then in 85. But I stole John Kearns and David Means, nicknamed Ovis, this kid. And they worked for me for a long time. John lives in Perth, Australia. He's been doing Bruce Springsteen and No Doubt tours for many, many years. And Ovis is originally from Shreveport, I think, Louisiana. And I think he's a musician. I think he moved back there. But so, yeah, Tobin's would have been trial. All studios are trial by fire, but Tobin's would have been, he was a character.
He was
kind of abusive.
He was rough. It was a rough gig because you had to work. I remember one time I was, I pretty quickly I started getting to go on the sessions,
Nice.
and which was just amazing.
Yeah, that's
just
amazing.
to be in the control room.
Yeah.
And I was running the tape machine,
The tape op. Yep.
The tape op. And I, just being in that room and watching people make records.
Yeah.
It was an education of a lifetime.
Studios on Burbank and Where
No,
was
back
it?
then, that was before he built the place in Burbank. He built later on.
Oh, okay.
But when I was there, it was like right on Ventura near Colfax
Oh,
in Studio
really?
City. Just in some kind of one of those kind of nondescript, like maybe 5
Like a
unit.
house?
No,
Or?
it's like a 5-unit little 1-story industrial
Oh,
building.
wow. I kind of wonder, because I live close. I'm not too far from there. I'm on the Colfax. I have to see what's there.
Yeah. So, so getting to do that and
what
getting
kind
to
of gear
just
did he have? What kind of tape machines did he have? Like
an
Atari?
MCI.
Oh, the MCI.
MCI 24 track.
Was that the JH24? Was that
I think so. It was one where you had the drawers to align it. You had to pull. There's like 3 drawers you pulled out.
Yeah, with a tweaker.
Yeah, you get a tweaker.
Different kind of tweaker, people. Yeah. It's a metal thing that you use to adjust the alignment on the tape machine.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it was really. I think I was actually there for a total of maybe 18 months total with George.
Wow, that's not very long.
But it was. I learned more in that. Then that was just was trial by fire, and it was one of those things where I remember one time after I was putting in 80 hours a week at least, right? I was living there, and I remember one time at the end,
people weren't doing drugs. No one was no one was doing any drugs to stay awake.
Well, let's put it this way: I couldn't afford to do any drugs.
Oh yeah, no, the staff you couldn't get messed up on staff. You had to keep it together.
Yeah. But I remember one time, really in particular, it's a really long session. And then at the end of the session, George goes, "Look, we got to paint the studio.
Fucker.
We got to redo the." And I like, "George, I've been here like all day." He goes,
"Fuck it.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You paint the studio." And I remember I said, "Well, that's just, I'm not going to paint the studio.
I'm below that.
I have standards.
I'm above that.
I'm an engineer." And I remember I went to my car and I sat in my car and I said, I started up. I said, "Wait a minute." And I said to myself, "Well, it's either this or pumping gas."
It's a bucket.
and I turned around and I got out of the car and I said, "Give me that paintbrush, George. Let's go. Let's rock this place."
Well, Ryan still has that same enthusiasm and probably painted a few studios since then. But so when you what was your first gig where you were a first engineer? Do you remember?
Well, it's interesting. There was George was working with an artist named Robert John, and there was a record called Sad Eyes, the song that Robert had written himself, and I got to be the engineer on that session.
Nice.
And record the vocals.
And George was a producer?
Yeah. No. And Mike Picarillo, who's another great guy, really talented guy. They were producing the album, and I got to be the engineer on that session. And after the album came out, Sad Eyes got turned into a #1 record.
Amazing. Did you get a Grammy?
I didn't get a Grammy, but Robert John got the Grammy for Best Vocal Performance.
Wow.
For the thing that I got to.
What's it called? Sad Eyes?
Sad Eyes, yeah.
I'm not familiar. I have to check it out.
Yeah. And then right after that, around the same time, my first tracking date, I remember George said there's some French guys coming in to do some French band. And I did the full tracking date, and it was just like, wow, I got to do the whole thing. And it was so exciting. Yeah. And we cut this track, and that track ended up, they ended up putting out the album. We finished the album. The album came out. That song is called Manureva, and it became a #1 record in France. So my first tracking date was, and then right after that, a Mexican artist named Juan Gabriel.
I know Juan Gabriel.
So Juan Gabriel shows up, and I do that album. This is like right in that little.
Juan Gabriel.
And that guy, I didn't know anything about. I didn't speak any Spanish.
Was he from Spain or Mexico?
Mexico.
Oh, right.
Ciudad Juarez, the border town right next to El Paso.
Wow.
And that album came out, and that album went big. It was called
all those players.
It was called Recuerdos.
Did he use like local cats, like who's Don Mario and Abe Senior, or who did he use?
Yeah,
they were that whole clique.
Yeah, they were.
Still, we work with Louis Conti.
Well, the thing was that those guys, the French guys, and some of the Mexican artists just knew that the quality of the studios was better in L.A.
Yeah.
We had great players.
Yeah, the best.
So they
the best.
Yeah, it's just kind of like they wanted to get a little bit more distinction for their stuff, and they could afford to do it, they'd come to LA.
Yeah, they were probably a big deal in Mexico already.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So right after that, I got all these French people and all these Latin artists.
You're an international producer.
All of a sudden they start calling. They want to show up and they want to work with me. And
they probably couldn't say your last name worth of crap.
Well, no, it's written in Spanish. I'm Ulyate. So it's fine. It makes sense.
It probably means like revelry or something.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know. But anyway, it was an amazing kind of a launching pad, so to speak.
You're great musicians.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you get kind of spoiled, I would think, you're playing with people like that. And then if you have to go back and do something that sucks, you're like, oh man.
Yeah. I've been really lucky. I mean, as a career, I've been really lucky on working on stuff that's usually
doesn't suck.
Yeah. Good. I mean, the occasional thing it's like, right. Oh God. But really for the most part, it's really been a really good. Did
you continue, like, once you started first thing, did you continue to work out of Tobin's place for the most part?
I did. Then what happened was Tobin's place, Tobin moved to his new place, and his biggest client took over his old place.
Okay.
And at that point, his biggest client was a guy named Haim Saban. And Haim Saban,
does everyone know the Saban Theater here in LA and every Saban Productions?
And this was
Wasn't it like two brothers? Weren't there like two or three Saban brothers? I don't know. I can't remember.
No, Haim was the guy, and then the guy who was his partner was a guy named Shuki Levy. And so I started. And Shuki's just a lovely guy, and they were Israeli.
Yeah.
And they came out here, and that was their first thing. And they were doing these things where they were
like jingles.
They were doing soundtracks for cartoons, for superhero cartoons.
Okay.
Right? So you do the Spider-Man kind of thing,
okay.
You do Spider-Man in Spanish,
okay.
I remember Spider-Woman, and Shuki would write the songs, and we'd bring in session guys, and we'd cut these tracks, and it was like Mujer Araña, Mujer Araña.
The woman Spider-Woman?
Woman Spider,
Araña.
yeah, exactly, Spider-Woman. And so we did all this stuff, and they made me a deal to be the chief engineer.
Oh, nice.
At the Sound Connection is what they called it.
Okay.
And I said goodbye to George and moved on to be the chief engineer at Sound Connection. And what was lovely about it is, I was chief engineer, so that's better than being.
Could you bring in artists? Like, could you develop artists?
Well, I was so busy. Doing stuff. I did develop an artist. His name was Ryan Ulyate. I actually recorded a bunch of demos in off time and kind of made my, it's my first kind of 24 track.
Your library catalog.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever had any of your own personal music? I mean, I heard your last album, his most recent album is amazing, and Atmos was killer. But have you ever had any of your music placed in television or film or anything like that?
No, I have not.
Yeah, my husband got one thing. My husband's a guitar player, Brian, and he got one thing placed in like a TV show, and it was very lucrative. It was like not just pennies. It was a lot of money. So you're doing these cartoons and stuff like that. I think the thing about stuff like that and jingles, I always tell people, is you learn how to be really good, really fast. Which is a great thing. This is a good thing.
Yeah.
So you're working with Saban and Shuki Levy, and then how did you branch out, or where did you ever work at Take One when I was the manager there? I don't think you did.
No, I didn't.
Or Red Zone, maybe? I don't know. Juan Gabriel came to Red Zone a couple times.
Yeah. So I did that for them for a while, and then I started getting more and more of these other artists showing up and wanting to work with me. So at some point,
did you work out of Sound Connection doing those?
Yeah, I did for a while, but then I got the French artist, who was a guy's name was Alain Chamfort. He wanted to do an album, but he wanted to do it in England and in France. And he wanted me to do it with him.
Oh, very nice.
And at that point, I said goodbye to my chief engineer gig, and I went independent.
Where did you guys do the record in France?
There was a place, a guy named John Congos had a studio outside of London.
Oh, nice.
And we did it there, and then we mixed it in Paris at this place. I think it was called Grand Army.
Okay.
A really big studio. Nice. Great story there. At that point, I was mixing it. The artist went off.
Were you recording on 8-track or 24-track?
It was 24.
Yeah.
And the artist went off, And I was there at the studio, and the manager said, "Hey, Andy Johns wants to come in and listen to the room."
I love him so much.
Right?
May he rest in peace. One of my favorite people.
So I got to meet Andy Johns, and Andy is just such a
the best dude.
Character,
Keith and I, he did a record here when I first came back. We're in East West Studio 2, where I have the privilege of being the manager.
Yeah.
But Andy came in when I first came back in 2010, and he did all these mixes of outtakes from Derek and the Dominoes that didn't make it to Layla. And it got released as a box set or something like that. But the other day, Keith and I found the drive, and we took it into Studio 5, and we were listening to all these songs. And I see why they didn't make it as singles on the original, because a lot of it was just sort of bluesy jams with Clapton and Duane Allman. But dude, it's killer. I'll play it for you sometime. It's so killer. And I loved Andy so much. If you don't know who Andy Johns is, first of all, you're listening to my podcast, and we're in a recording studio right now, so you better look it up, okay? Yeah, he did Sticky Fingers when he was 19.
Yeah.
Younger brother of Glenn Johns.
Right.
They both worked with The Who, Led Zeppelin, everybody, but Andy was a mensch. Yeah. He was a really great engineer. But anyway, so we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly. Well, the funniest thing about Andy, he comes in and
he was already drunk,
and he's listening, and then he turns it up, and I'm like, God, this guy listens really loud. And he basically blows up the monitor.
Oh shit! While he's listening to the room.
Yeah, and he goes, okay, he splits.
Oh great! Yeah, studio manager's nightmare.
I'm in the middle of mixing. Luckily they fixed it pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, or you're using near fields right after that.
Yeah, no, I'd always use a combination. I actually hadn't brought my own near fields.
What near fields did you have back then?
I can't remember what they were. I think they were called MDMs. They were really nice little near fields.
Oh, cool.
So
another thing for all of you to know, the NS10 is still kind of the standard, but the reason that some of these, I don't want to call them low-fi, but let's be real, lower-fi near fields was everybody would compare their mix to your car stereo. And car stereos then were like car stereos now. Car stereos then were just, you were trying to listen to it and say, okay, this is what it's going to sound like on the radio if I listen to it in my car. You know what I mean? So it wasn't high fidelity necessarily. I mean, the mix had to be amazing to translate from every environment, right? But you would go ahead and you would listen, or you'd listen on Oratones or NS10s, and you go, okay, it sounds good here, so it's going to sound good anyway. I mean, was that the thought?
Yeah, that was the thought. And also, every studio is different.
True.
And the big monitors in every studio are completely different.
Yeah.
At least with the near fields, like with like an NS10,
yeah,
you knew what it was.
Yeah.
I knew how to make it. It had to have a certain sound.
To sound like.
On an NS10, it better be pretty aggressive sounding.
Yeah.
It better tear your head off a little bit, because that's, unless you put some toilet paper over the tweeters, which is
the Ortone thing, right?
Yeah, well, the NS10s, that was the thing. You put toilet paper in front of the tweeters, and it knocks them down a little bit.
Okay, and also you could probably see the air moving the toilet paper.
And that was the other thing about the NS10s. You could always tell how much bass you had. I'd always look at them sideways and see how far the cone was flapping, and it's like, oh, too much bass, got to roll a little filter a little off, because you're popping.
Young engineers, now you got a new trick.
Yeah.
So cool. So you go to Europe and you do that. What was the artist's name again?
Alain Chamfort.
Oh, got it. Can we hear? Can I look him up on Spotify?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. He's there.
So when you came back to the States, you're independent now. Were you in demand? Was that scary?
Well,
or did you have a slump?
I did have a slump. At some point, I started. Well, I got to get tight with Juan Gabriel. He built a studio out in El Paso.
Okay.
So I moved out to El Paso. And moved out to El Paso and helped him put his studio together, and made a couple albums with him there.
Whoa.
I made an album with a woman named Isabel Pantoja, who he was producing. And that album ended up being like #1 on the Latin charts for like a year. It was just huge.
When Gabrielle worked at Red Zone, when I managed Red Zone, but I'm not sure who was working with him then.
And then I was working on another musical project with my wife at the time, Stacy, who's now Stacey Evans, and
first wife. I've met Ryan's wife Judith, his current wife, and his last wife, I'm sure.
And we were working on a project, and
is she a singer?
No, but lyricist, and
okay.
And so we were working on a project, and tried to shop it around. It didn't happen. Then I went back to trying to get gigs doing Latin albums, and that kind of dried up. So that's when I kind of hit a thing, and then I met this guy, this really cool guy named Craig Harris, and Craig was he was working as a sound designer, but really high end stuff, and he had this machine called a synclavier.
Oh, dude! So the original sampler, right?
Yeah.
Which was, and musicians thought, "Oh my God, what's going to happen to us?" I met a guy named Steve Crows when I was at Red Zone and Take One, and Synclavier gave us. He had like a endorsement with Synclavier, and we had a Synclavier room.
Yeah. And it was like, it was the future.
Was it about as big as this table?
Oh, it was like, well, the keyboard part was the thing, and then the actual machine was like this big giant rack.
Yeah.
And it had like this thing called a Winchester drive, which was like the first hard drive.
Oh, right.
And it was like about,
massive.
It was this big, and it was like, 100 megabytes or so,
wow.
whatever, whatever. It was just some insanely small amount of
storage. Yeah.
But those things were expensive, and Craig was the guy if you wanted some crazy.
Craig Harris.
Craig was the guy if you wanted some crazy sounds. You would go to him, and he did some stuff on some records. He did some stuff he did some stuff for films. And
you were his guy?
I decided that I just decided I showed up at his studio. I said, I want to work here.
You're going to pay me to be your guy.
Exactly. And he was doing 30-second commercials like for Budweiser and really high-end national TV spots.
So just I'm trying to remember. So you've got the Synclavier. It's got its own hard drive and stuff, but are you recording everything to tape still? Are you recording it and storing it into Synclavier?
I think at that point it was all Synclavier, and then the mixes would go to digital, to Sony. Remember that Sony? There was a Sony stereo kind of thing. You recorded it. You actually it had a converter, but you could record it on beta cassettes.
Oh yeah.
It was before the 1630.
We had early on we had a Westar console, and the Mitsubishi 32-track digital machine was like the leasing, the diamond leasing package or some stuff like that. My brother Steve, who's a great engineer, still got. But the Sony then had the 48-track digital machine, right? Which is the big machine. And everybody was archiving at that point. A lot of the labels were archiving to digital because they thought it would be safer. And at the end of the day, to be honest with you, they ended up going back to analog tape in the 90s because they weren't sure of how long these digital masters would last. But they were good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were fine.
Yeah. So I learned all about that, and I learned about sound design, and I learned about how to produce something, a 30-second spot, which is a completely different thing, but great to learn, really. And that actually helped a lot in the stuff I did later on.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. It teaches you that workflow to be good fast.
Yeah.
Jingles, I don't do any jingles here anymore, but it was really good training. Yeah. Doing commercials and stuff like that. Yeah. My stomach is growling. All right, so this is cool. So that was, what was the name of Craig's place? Just Craig's Place?
Yeah, Craig Harris Music.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then what happens after Craig's?
Well,
it's hard to remember the chronology of our lives.
Then the next thing that happens is that went on for a while, and then Craig moved on to other things, and we kind of went our own ways. And a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, who I'd actually met because he knew all about how to do computers and music.
Right.
And this guy's name is Mark Mann.
Okay.
And Mark, I knew him. I actually hired him to come out to El Paso to work on some of these Juan Gabriel projects. Yeah. And I stayed in touch with him. He goes and he says, "Hey,
was the Mac out yet? Did we have?
Mac Pluses? The Mac was out. This was like 1990 when I kind of made my next move around 1996.
Oh, we didn't really have. We had Pro Tools, I think.
97. No, I had Pro Tools. I started out with Sound Tools.
Yeah.
And then I had a Pro Tools system. So I've always had like, a DigiDesign,
latest, greatest
thing. I always had a Mac, a big Mac with all that stuff. Yeah. I'd always been messing around with it. So I was pretty good at all the digital stuff. Yeah. And so my friend Mark Mann says, "Hey, I know Jeff Lynne, and I've been doing some work with him. Jeff's looking for an engineer.
I'm such a huge fan.
Are you interested?" I'm like, Yeah, that'd be really fun to go,
Although, I'm a huge fan. Although in 1976, I remember a quote that Jeff Lynne wrote in Rolling Stone magazine. He said, "We're going to be bigger than the Beatles." And I thought, wow, what a pompous guy. But he'd say that. But I am a huge Jeff Lynne fan, huge ELO fan. So I got over it pretty quick because that year was the year 1976. Obviously it's before the 90s, before Ryan meets Jeff Lynne. But in 76, they came out with the album that had Evil Woman on it. And it had Knight Rider. What's the name of that ELO record? Probably ELO. But it was a great record. And it was the same year that Patti Smith came out with her record, Horses. And I was getting out of high school, and I remembered I just played that over and over and over. And I love ELO to this day.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Jeff,
incredible musician.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you get to meet Jeff Lynne?
I get to meet Jeff.
Exciting. Like 97, 98?
97, I think. And I get to meet Jeff, and I do the session with him. And I remember at the end of the session, I hadn't really been doing much stuff with tape recorders, and he was all analog.
Mr. Analog, yeah.
So I'm punching in on 24 tracks. I remember at the end we were doing some vocals. And at the very end, I realized I had left something in recording.
Oh, dude, you erased a vocal.
I erased something.
Fucking Jeff Lynne?
Yes.
Holy crap.
And I'm like, Jeff, I got to tell you, it was great knowing you. I'll
leave now.
I won't come back tomorrow, obviously.
But he was cool.
And he was like, oh, it's okay. I said, well, I'm singing again. Screw it. And
I'm
like, and at the end of the session, it's like, so what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, nothing. He goes, why don't you come back and we'll do some more stuff.
You were honest about it, and you felt bad. He probably got it. Shit happens all the time.
Yeah.
We know, it's happy accidents as well as forgettable accidents.
Exactly.
Let's forget about that. That never happened. You never did that again.
Yeah.
Did you?
Nope.
So was the connection, is that how you met Tom? Was through
Well,
Jeff
yeah,
Lynne?
because I'd started doing a bunch of stuff with Jeff, and
Tom Petty.
For me, it was, at that point, I'd actually been a producer and produced a lot of Latin stuff, and kind of thought of myself as a producer and et cetera. But with Jeff, I was an engineer because it's Jeff. It's like I'll kind of go back to down a rank.
I don't know if it's really going down.
No, it's not at all. Because at that point, Jeff is like, and the classic thing with Jeff is like, he wouldn't say, you would just be day to day. He said, you call it phone call. You want to come by tomorrow? Yeah, okay.
Do you remember what you made per hour back then?
It was pretty good.
Oh, good.
It was pretty good. I got paid well.
Oh, good.
By Jeff.
Yeah, classy.
Yeah, totally classy.
Like it.
Really well. And but I remember he'd call, and it's like,
So did he have a studio here in LA?
Yeah, had a studio in his house up in the hills.
Nice.
Yeah. And at that point, I remember he'd call and he'd go, "Hey, Ringo's coming around tomorrow. Can you think you can make it?" It's like,
yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, I can make it. Yeah. And it was like that, And then at some point, George is coming around, and I got to meet George, and so we're really kind of a cool story about George.
I've met George, and I met George, Ringo, and Paul. I never met John Lennon, but yeah.
Yeah, same with me.
Oh wow.
Yeah. With George, it was like Jeff was working on his own album, and he wanted George to play slide on it.
Paul, if you hear this, don't be offended, but George was my favorite Beatle, even when I was young. Everybody loved Paul because Paul was cute, but George, to me, I always felt like he needed to get more songs on the records. You know what I mean? I always loved George's tracks. And you could tell when a track was George's.
Yeah.
Be honest.
For sure.
I think.
For sure.
Yeah. So you got to meet, Ringo came by.
Ringo came by, and then, but the George story I was going to say is that he had Jeff knew a guitar tech named Danny Farrington. Fantastic, just a genius, one of the greatest guitar techs of all time. And so Jeff said, look, I don't want to waste George's time, so I want you guys to get here early and get Danny, who's going to get a guitar set up. I want you to get a sound and get everything to go. So when George
play a Strat? What did he play?
I don't remember what this guitar was. The guitar that Danny had set up, it had high action because he was going to play slide on it, so it was really raised up. Okay. I think it was some kind of a Gibson. I don't really remember the guitar, but it wasn't a Strat.
Okay.
So we're getting a sound, and I'm getting I put a 57 on the amp and real basic stuff, and Danny's playing, and it's like, well, it sounds okay. I think it should be good. George shows up, and George starts playing the guitar, and the guitar just all of a sudden goes from sounding okay to just
singing
amazing.
Like God. Yeah,
and
it's like angels.
I realized that, we think we're such a big deal, us engineers, that we get these sounds. We don't get the sounds.
You capture
exactly.
the
The
magic.
musician makes the sound.
Oh,
and
yes.
you just got to grab it and not screw it up.
I constantly tell my staff, I'm like, look, we're all subordinate to the music.
Yeah.
Whatever the artist's vision is, whatever's coming out of their hands, their mouth, their mind, whatever, we're here to capture it as best as we possibly can and not mess it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you make it better.
Yeah. Just get out of the way.
Yeah. Get out of the way. Yeah. Yeah. I said that too. Yeah. So George, do you remember what the track was?
It was a track that eventually became went on to an album called Zoom.
Okay.
So it became an ELO album.
Oh, okay.
And the album was called Zoom, and I think it came out around 2000-ish.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I
was in this building then. I came here in 98.
Yeah. So that happened, and
Tom came by one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that must have happened.
Well, the other thing that happened before Tom is that then George while Jeff was working on his album, George wanted Jeff to finish. George was working on an album and wanted to work with Jeff on it. And then, I mean, tragically and sadly, George got sick and he died before he finished the album.
Oh, man.
You know, and it was just, everybody was just knocked out. Just complete bummer.
Dude, when the Beatles disbanded, you know, after Abbey Road or whatever. Oh, I think it was after Abbey Road. Anyway, when the Beatles disbanded, All Things Must Pass, I thought each of their solo efforts, no flies on any of them.
Yeah.
They're all great. Ringo, great.
Yeah.
You know, all of them amazing, without question.
Yeah.
Every one of them. But All Things Must Pass, favorite record, still one of my favorite records to this day. Double album, great record.
Yeah.
And there's a story that Brian tells, my husband told me, that supposedly John Lennon and Yoko went to EMI and George was in the other room and Ringo was playing on one of George's tracks, and John and Yoko heard a George track. It was probably something from All Things Must Pass. And John was like, holy crap, George, this is really good. Or something like that.
Right,
like something, you know, and then I think John might have like played on it or something. And there was no acrimony, you know what I mean?
Right.
It was like when musicians bond, there is no, you know, color, race, it goes out the window. Musicians are musicians first and foremost, I think. Even those guys.
Yeah.
And Ringo came in here not too long ago. He was so great. I said, he said, how much is a session? And I said, it was a couple hours with Bruce Sugar, great engineer. And it was like $450 or something. I said, I tell you what, you don't have to pay me if you get me tickets to your show.
Wow.
So he got us tickets to, Doug, if you're listening to this, my boss, don't get mad at me. I had to do it. It was Ringo. And then he ended up playing the Greek and I was out of town. So Keith went in my stead.
Good going, Keith.
Yeah, I was out
nice
of town.
Move.
But God bless, Ringo's still with us and still out there doing his all-star thing. Is amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you're doing the thing. And
so as one of
George.
the other projects I got to work on was this, because George had died, had passed, the album wasn't finished. So George's son, Danny, and his wife, Olivia, came to L.A. and brought everything that George had done up to then, and brought the album in, and we finished it, which was just such a lovely thing, project. And Danny was, Danny was there, and Jeff was there.
Fine musician in his own right.
A fantastic musician. And, we finished the album, and that album was called Brainwashed.
Okay.
And it's still to this day one of my favorite albums.
I'm going to get it.
It's just so good. It holds up so well, and it's so fun and poignant and meaningful. And George was talking about real stuff that was happening in the world and his take on it. And it's really good.
A cerebral guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Spiritual guy, too.
Totally.
Yeah.
And,
amazing. So what's it called?
Brainwashed.
Brainwashed.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of telling. But
it's still relevant.
Yeah. I'm assuming that this may have led to your working on the concert for George.
That's right. That's what.
By the way, those of you who know me, that's how I met Ryan. I stalked him. I was at a Grammy party, and they go, this is Ryan Ulyate. He's the guy that did the concert for George in 5-1. And I'm like, I got to meet that guy. That's the bet to date. Sorry, rest of you engineers out there. To date, the best 5-1 thing I've ever heard. For me, it's always better with picture anyway, but
Yeah.
for multi-channel stuff like Atmos, whatever.
Yeah.
But dude, oh my God, so incredible. And Leon Russell's on it. Does Leon Russell do
No, Leon Russell isn't.
no, he wasn't on that one. He was
Yeah.
on the original Concert for
That's right.
Bangladesh.
Yeah,
Okay, so
the Concert for George had, it had
Was it
Paul.
Clapton?
Paul was on it. Eric Clapton was kind of like the musical director.
Right. Okay.
So it was his band. There's two drummers. There was Henry Spinetti, who was in Eric's band at the time.
And where was that recorded? Was it
at the Royal Albert Hall in London?
Duh. So you got to record it live there?
So what happened is I kind of overseed the recording of it live. We used a really good, a really good crew.
Like a mobile truck?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And but what I made sure is that they were going to use these Sony 48-track machines, and they had just come out with the Sony 3348 HR, which was 24-bit. And there was only like 4 of them in Europe. Wow. And I got all 4
nice.
for this thing, because there was a whole.
I can't even do the math on that. So we got 96 and 96. So we're 48, 48, 48, 48. Well, somebody do the math. Well, the on thing that. What's 4 times 48?
Yeah, but the thing is, they had 2 trucks because
192.
Because the first part of the set was an Indian orchestra that was conducted by Ravi Shankar, right. And Ravi had actually written a piece especially for this, and his daughter Anushka was playing sitar.
Oh, I've seen it.
And so they needed an entire remote truck just for that.
Oh, okay.
And then there was a different remote truck because after the Indian music had concluded, then it was full on rock and roll, and it was a rock and roll thing. So we had the rock and roll truck. And the reason why you have to have 2 machines isn't that you're recording 96 tracks, is that because it's live, you got to start the one before you run out of tape on the.
Right.
You need 2 machines just to keep the continuity.
Keep it rolling.
Keep it rolling.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah. And then and then of course you had to make safeties up, all that stuff.
Yeah. And then after it was done, I went and transferred it to Pro Tools. Spent like 4 days transferring everything into Pro Tools.
Did you do a stereo mix as well?
Yeah, then after we got back from London, we mixed it at Jeff's studio in L.A.
Okay.
The stereo.
Right. Okay.
And spent a lot of time just getting that right and dialed in. And then for the 5.1, we went to Village.
Okay.
And at that point, Jeff Greenberg was really super helpful.
Oh, awesome.
I love him. And we went into Studio D,
nice.
the Fleetwood Mac studio,
yes.
The awesome room.
Yes.
And another kind of fun story is that I had never done a 5.1 mix before. And I said,
amazing.
I said to Jeff, do you know any engineer that I could just hire for a day?
Was it Ken Calais?
No, it's even better than that, right? So he goes, yeah, I know a guy who does a lot of stuff all the time, right? His name is John Kurlander.
Oh, John Kurlander.
So John Kurlander, and so I called John. I said, "Look, would you be willing to just,
John's a scoring and film guy predominantly."
Yeah. It says, I'll hire you for a day. Can you just kind of
British?
Yeah, and just kind of help me get this thing going. I don't know anything about 5.1.
Fools, John Kurlander.
No, he's a lovely guy.
He is great.
And he said, well, what is it? I said, well, I can't tell you. Because at that point, it's you're in that world.
NDAs.
It's like, hey.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll just show up. You'll see when you get here. So he shows up, and I said, it's George. He goes, you do realize I was the head engineer at Abbey Road for a number of years.
Oh, right. Of course he was.
And he said, you do realize also that I was the guy who was in the machine room and punched in George's guitar solo on something.
Right.
So here's this guy who just completely randomly was going to be this, who has this connection.
How fucking perfect. Right? How genius. But you knew all along, Ryan. You knew the connection. It was perfect. You had the foresight.
So John was just lovely, and he just told me about stuff. He goes, he says, hey, so what about that center speaker? What do you do about that? He goes, put stuff in it,
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of it. Just use it,
Yeah.
And he showed me some things, and we got kind of a setup, and we kind of got through one song. And I said, thank you so much. And I went on and mixed the rest of it.
Dude, it's killer.
Yeah.
It's killer. It's one of my favorites. And so that's a big deal. So when does Tom come in? Where does Tom Petty come into play?
Because Tom was at the Concert for George. The Heartbreakers had their own. The Heartbreakers was interesting. The Concert for George was pretty much Eric Clapton's band, sort of a house band, and then various people would come and go. But they were pretty much the rhythm section was pretty much the same.
Okay.
They asked Tom Petty to come and do some stuff, and he said, "I'm doing it, but I want my band with me."
Yeah.
So he flew all the Heartbreakers out there. So
Nice.
so that's the one part in the concert. If
Was
you
Stan
watch
still
it,
drumming?
no, it was Steve Ferrone.
Okay, right.
So at that point in the concert, the house band goes away, and it's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Right.
And they all flew in. They told me how they had to. They took like a Gulfstream, their private jet. They had like go to Newfoundland.
Oh.
And I think that their manager, Tony Dimitriadis, I think their manager at the time booked him a gig in Newfoundland.
Yeah, because he would do that, right?
Wait, so
Yeah.
And then they had to fly from there to Ireland or something like that. But anyway, they did the thing. They were great, and I was just blown away at how good they were.
Sitting in a room that Tom did a couple records in, by the way.
That's right. So anyway, when we got done with it and we mixed it and everything, Jeff asked Tom to come in and listen to the mix. And I just remember it's like, oh God, Tom Petty's good.
But he'd met you. Had you met Tom at the concert or no?
No.
Okay.
Because I was in the truck. I was kind of I wasn't hanging, I was,
I get it.
So I think that's when I met him, right around then. And at that point, he listened to it and he liked it. It's like, phew.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. And he liked what he
liked it.
One of the things I always loved about Tom is he was a true band leader.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he said to me one time, he said, I have to have a producer to sort of keep me in check. He goes, because I'm the leader of the band. So I need someone who's not afraid to tell me no or whatever. He said that to me one time. He said, so that's why we'd hire Rick Rubin or whomever. He said, Tom didn't need anybody to produce him. He had, then he had you in later years, but he was reasonable, I thought.
Oh, he was the best. He was he was such a great guy and such a talent, and also brought out the best in everyone around him. He was really good. Everyone around him were on their A game. And
I think Mike Campbell is one of the most amazing guitar players in the world, and the sweetest guy. Ben Montench, Howie. Who was the other members of the band?
Well, at that point, Howie had passed away by then. Okay. So, I think that was right around when Howie.
Didn't Ray Blair come back?
Yeah. So at that point,
Ron Blair.
Ron was playing bass. So at that point, the lineup was Ron Blair.
He had a great accent.
Yeah, and it was
very Southern.
Ron's such a lovely guy.
Sweetie pie.
Yeah, and Scott Thurston was also.
That's who I meant, Scotty.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, just an amazing guy and a really nice, fun guy. I'd go on the road with them sometimes. Nice. Sometimes just like when we'd finish an album and they'd be the first week on the road, I'd kind of sit by the front of house guy Robert Scoville and say, hey, this is how I think it should be. He didn't need me to be there, but I got to go on the road a little bit and fly in the Gulfstream and shit. So that was fun.
Nice.
And Scott was my road buddy. We'd go out and have lunch, before the gig, someplace.
Dude, just great musicians. And you're talking about guys who've been playing together for a long time, especially when Ron Blair came back. I mean, these are guys that play together like almost out of high school together.
Yeah.
Like early on was it Mudcrutch or Mudcrutch was the first.
Yeah, Mudcrutch was the first
incarnation.
Kind of,
I remember when Damn the Torpedoes came out. I was still living in South Carolina. I was going to school at College Charleston, and I drove to Savannah, and he played in Savannah. And dude, the Heartbreakers, they played for 3.5 hours, and Tom still I kick myself because I saw him at the Fonda. One of his last shows, but I had tickets. To the Bowl to see that last show that he did before he passed. And like an idiot, I didn't go to the show. And I kicked myself because we didn't know.
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah. That was a great show. There was, they did a couple.
Oh, yeah, just rub it in, Ryan.
Yeah.
You missed the best show he ever did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
But you got that collaboration, became a one of many, but a collaboration of your life, co-producing with Tom and working with Tom.
Yeah, we did an album after the concert for George. That's what the album that we did, an album called Highway Companion.
Right.
And that was Tom and Jeff and Mike were. I think Jeff and Tom and Mike were the producers, and I was.
Did you do any Traveling Wilburys stuff? Did you?
I got to do some stuff with because Jeff at that point they were doing a box set. So
Oh,
I got to do some remixes. I got to mix
okay.
like some unmixed some track that Dylan had that they didn't make it. So I got to mix some Dylan stuff
Nice.
and redo a couple of the Wilburys things. So yeah, that was a lot of
No,
fun.
no flies on you. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing
I mean,
getting that stuff.
you and I know you've been working with the I don't know what they call it, the estate or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you've been doing a lot of stuff. What's some of the stuff that you've I didn't see the documentary. Didn't they do another documentary? I went to one back when I worked at Cello, when this was Cello. I went to one, and Tom was so gracious, invited me to Warner Brothers to see that movie,
Yeah.
which was killer.
Yeah, that was called Running Down a Dream.
Running Down a
It
Dream.
was
Yeah, yeah.
directed by Peter Bogdanovich.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. But then you got to work on something that was the most recent thing that they did. Didn't they do another documentary or?
That was there was a documentary about wildflowers. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our dear friend Jim Scott,
Yeah.
who also worked in this room.
Right.
Honeybee, one of my favorite songs.
Right.
Yeah, what a great song. What a great record.
Yeah, that's a great
Tom, I mean, he did a record here when it was Cello with George Drakoulias. And if you haven't listened to it, it's also one of my favorite records. It's called The Last DJ. It's a great record. And Tom, as usual, in his acerbic wit and his lyrics, is basically paying homage to DJs and how DJs broke music on radio stations and how it got sort of taken over by suits at record companies. And, the kid, or you couldn't, it just wasn't the same. And I think Tom kind of shined a light like, hey, get out of the way and let the DJs and the musicians and the fans sort of help dictate the music and promote the music. But yeah, he was so I've loved Tom Petty, man. Amazing. So what have you been working on for the estate? Like what kind of stuff have you been doing?
After Tom passed, we went back and did a big box set. And that's kind of what we've been doing since Tom passed. And that is the first one we did is called An American Treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just going through the whole history, starting with the early stuff and going all the way all the way through his entire career, both with the Heartbreakers and with Mudcrutch and as a solo artist, just the whole thing. So it was a real deep dive. And we got to really kind of go through there and try and find unreleased stuff.
Was stuff stored at like the Warner Vault, or where was a lot of it kept, or where were the tapes? Where was the tape?
Well, Tom has his own library, and and he was very very
Iron
meticulous.
Mountain. He was always very hip with Iron Mountain.
Yeah, they're very meticulous, and Bugs,
God bless.
his right hand man,
amazing,
Alan Weidel. They were very good about cataloging everything and making sure that they knew where all the outtakes were and where all the tapes were.
I wish other artists would follow suit on that.
That's such a huge part, especially, and that would be my advice to anybody. If you are in possession of masters, or as soon as you finish a project, make sure you back that stuff up. Make sure you do things like make stems. Because with the digital stuff, you might not be able to get it back because
the drive could die,
or it could be on some hard drive that runs on some system that's gone,
right?
Or it's a hard drive. Well, where do I plug it in? They don't have those kind of hard drives anymore.
Right.
So the archival aspect of
was it all backed
music,
up on analog?
Yeah, it was.
Awesome.
So and I've been really good about that too. But yeah, the good news is that we were able to. There is a library to look through. To find this stuff.
But quite a task to be the keeper of that flame, that vault. Good for you.
Well, that's and after that, then we went on and we did a real deep dive into wildflowers, which was so much fun too. Yeah. They spent I think they spent about a year, doing it. I ended up transferring 240, I believe. I think that's something like that. 240 2-inch tapes.
Dude, in the room we're in, he worked for 18 months. And it wasn't just The Last DJ. He was working, I don't know all the different stuff. Oh, was it the end of Wildflowers as well? That makes sense. Thanks for that, Keith. So yeah, so that was like, and I remember he would leave for like a month or so and go on tour, and then he would come back. And that whole time was kind of a blur to me. But my old assistant, I interviewed her, Ashley Arison, she's amazing. And I interviewed her for this podcast, and she said, don't you remember the day you hired me? You walked me into Studio 2 and you said, Tom, this is Ashley. She's going to be my assistant. I'm like, really? And she goes, yeah. She goes, and every Friday, Tom would buy you like a bottle of Cristal or a bottle of good champagne and leave it on your desk. And I go, God, how can I not remember that? Because there was a liquor store across the street called Mr. Lee's, this Korean guy ran. And I'm like, right on Tom, man. He was so nice to me. He was really just the story that you'll appreciate. And I get back to you because it's about you, but you'll appreciate this story. I was in the office one day and everybody was gone. I'm like, where the hell did everybody go? And Willie Nelson had shown up and was working in Studio 1, and Tom was in here in Studio 2. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And like, they're barbecuing in the parking lot or whatever. And this is pre, cell phone. So I can't find anybody. And we have like a big intercom throughout the building then. And so I'm like, where the fuck did everybody go? And I have a camera in my office, like a split screen. And I'm like, oh, and they're in the parking lot. So I walked out, I'm like, Tom Petty and Willie Nelson are smoking a joint and the runners are all out there. Why I'm going out there. So I walk out there and I'm like, get the fuck back inside. Somebody answer the phone. I'm going to go hang with Tom and Willie. So I smoke a joint with Tom and Willie in the parking lot. And I had this PT Cruiser. I had 3 PT Cruisers. I had this PT Cruiser, and on the back of the bumper, there was a South Carolina flag sticker on the back of my bumper. And Willie had been here for like a day. And he goes, hey, Tom, he goes, Candace is the boss. And Tom goes, I know. And he goes, and she's from South Carolina. And Tom goes, South Kakalaki. And I go, yep. And he goes, I'm from Gainesville. I'm like, yes, I know. And he goes, where are you from in South Carolina? I go, I'm from Charleston. And Tom Petty goes, ooh, high tone. That was a huge compliment. Oh, it was a huge compliment.
Well, you are high tone.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. But I got to smoke a joint with Willie Nelson and Tom Petty,
wow,
dude. It made my
life. That's pretty good.
Made my decade. It's like, and things like that. Like you look back on you on the arc of your career, and all those special magical moments that you got to help facilitate Tom's dreams or any of the artists that you ever worked. It's fucking an honor, man. It's a privilege.
It is an honor. And it's really fun to be involved in something that makes people happy.
Right?
I really dig that part about the job. Is because when people talk to you, it's like, oh, I love that album. Yeah. It's like, it's cool.
Well, it's funny. I was, and I said Ryan and I are in the same wine club, and we had wine lunch yesterday. I'm a little beat up, but the talk. It's a group of engineers ultimately, and studio managers, and ultimately the talk is always of music and what people worked on. And Ryan was telling a funny story before we started today about Stephen Miller, who's a member of the wine group, who started talking about. Stephen is such a brainiac. He's like, what record came out June 6th of 1976 or whatever? And you guessed it.
Well, no, I think it was June of 71.
Or 71,
Stephen said 2 very important albums came out.
Who's Next, right?
I said, I guessed Who's Next. And then he goes, well, what's the other one? I'm like, King Crimson? No.
Dude, so good.
And I'm like, Pink Floyd? No. And it was Mahavishnu Orchestra, the Inner Mounting Flame.
Oh, right. So one of the things that I want to bring to people's attention in this podcast, like I said, is like, there's no one way, we're still on the journey, right? But there's no one way to get there. You become an assistant engineer. Maybe you think the stuff you're working on isn't all that great. You know what? It's all great. Every single thing you do, and I think Ryan will attest, from the Mexican Spider Woman cartoons or whatever, or with Saban or whatever, everything you do, is another step in the journey. And it's all like who you meet along the way and the pivotal people that influence you and sort of, help you along the journey while you're helping them along with their journey. And I think we're just so lucky, I just like,
yeah, totally. Completely. And, and I think there's a certain kind of an attitude that I see the people who tend to do well
to succeed.
Yeah, it's just
you got to be excited.
Yeah, and you got to be willing to do whatever it takes, and not necessarily. There's a lot of a lot of musical roads you can go down sometimes can lead to nothing. but if you're working with an artist who wants to try something, you've got to facilitate that.
Yeah.
You've got to, you can't say, no, I don't think so. Or
don't be a snob and think you know better.
Yeah, because you don't, my rule was always the speakers don't lie. I'll do anything. I'll try anything. I don't care.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, because we'll know if it's good as soon as we hear it. So let's just do it. Let's go for it.
Well, I know what now. I went to the playback, and you have to forgive me because I forgot the name of your record, your new record.
It's called Act 3.
That's right. So we're in our golden years. We're not in our golden years yet. We're sort of in our copper years. we're leading up to the golden years because we're never going to be in our golden years. I mean, I later I'm going to talk to I'm hoping the same day to someone who's a real treasure, which is Don Randy. But I was talking earlier to Sam, who's one of the runners here, head runner. He's going to go be an assistant, and I was telling him about someone, and this guy came in a couple months ago who I've known for a long time. You would know this guy. He's a conductor and an arranger. His name's Joe Soldo. And he's been around forever. And he happens to be Italian. And he comes in to do a session in Studio One, right? You would have run across him in your travels. Mm-hmm. And I said, Joe, how old are you now? I've known you for such a long time. How old are you? And he goes, Candace, I'm 99. Yeah. 99 years old. Flew from Florida, rented a car, drove to the studio, got up, conducted the session, wrote the arrangements, gave out the charts. I mean, 99.
Yeah.
It's not work if you're having fun, right?
Well, yeah. And I think it's so, that's what's so great about the music is I'm never going to get tired of it.
Yeah. And Act 3 is very cool. Where can people hear Act 3?
You can stream it on Amazon and on Apple.
Okay.
And on Tidal.
Okay.
And you can also download it.
All right.
In immersive audio format from immersiveaudioalbum.com. And I mixed it in. I've been doing a lot of mixing in immersive audio with Dolby Atmos.
Yes.
And I started doing that in 2020 with Wildflowers.
Wow.
And for my own album,
Dude, where did I get to hear Wildflowers in 5.1?
It's streaming.
Okay, go ahead.
That's great. It's fantastic.
I mean, in my office, Dan McCarroll, who used to work at Amazon, God bless you, Dan, he gave me an Amazon Echo HD.
Yeah, right.
Which is, and I gotta be honest, it sounds pretty good. Like it shoots out the room. Yep. It's not the same as a system like you would have, but it plays back Atmos and HD stuff pretty cool.
Yep, and there's some speaker systems that are out. Sonos makes some really good speaker systems for Atmos, and they're just not.
I don't have an Atmos room here. I actually don't get much call for it because I think a lot of people like yourself, you're doing it in your own studio,
right?
Which is fine, which is good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Just remember, all Atmos mixers are not created equal.
Well, that's right, and I think you might want to think about doing an Atmos room. I don't know. I don't think the format. Let's put it this way. We've seen many formats come and go.
I don't know if it's going
over
away
the years.
Soon.
This one, I'm pretty convinced it's not going away because there are so many other uses for it, like for VR. When there's just games. It's just a format that if there are these immersive environments.
Yeah.
So it's not going anywhere, and I think that it really behooves artists to jump into it, understand it, and work with the system because, like you said, there's some really good Atmos mixes and there's some really boring Atmos mixes.
It's become part of, I think, the mandatory deliverables to a label. I think with most of the artists that we work with here, there's a young mixer here. His name is Jeff Ellis. He's a tenant here, and he's also East West alum. But he works with a lot of artists on 88 Rising and like Snow Allegra and Nikki and people like that. And almost always he has to deliver an Atmos mix after he does a stereo mix.
Yeah. And I love it. And when I decided to make my album in Atmos, it's in stereo also, but I decided to make it in Atmos because it's just, for a creator, it's just amazing sonic palette. You've got.
Did you press vinyl of Act 3?
No, I haven't done vinyl yet, but I think I am going to do a limited run. Man. I know, it'd be awesome on vinyl.
You gotta do it. It'd be awesome.
I know.
Well, there's so much stuff we could talk about that we probably haven't even remotely covered. But like I said, if you get a chance to listen to Ryan's personal record, Act 3, you can hear it. He said on Tidal,
Amazon, Apple.
Yeah, check it out. It's killer, actually. It's really, really good. I really loved it. I loved it. And I got to sit with Jim Scott and listen
That's right. We had
to your playback.
Dolby let us use their Vine Street theater, which is it's called the Dolby Vine Theater, and it's I think it holds about 80 people.
It sounded great.
Yeah,
I was honored to be included.
Well, you had to be included, Candace. You know, you're
so what's
high toned.
What's next for Ryan? You going to do some more records? You going to keep working? I know you're going to keep working with the Petty Estate.
Yeah, there's more stuff with the Petty Estate.
Are you going to dig into stuff like Damn the Torpedoes? Have you done that already?
No, I always let them drive the bus.
Sure, of course.
You know,
of course.
And you know, Tom's daughter Adria is very she's very strategic about the way that
she's an incredible videographer.
Yeah, and she really wants to run it with the kind of care and the respect that it does. You know, and
it's like Danny Harrison. It's like God bless.
Well, that's right. That's the way
people.
that the Harrisons have run George's stuff. That's kind of that's what they're going for. That's
the benchmark.
And I think that I really respect that. I really do. You know,
sure.
and Tom himself always wanted to put things out when they were ready to be put out. He didn't want to just throw stuff out there.
Right.
You know, and he wanted it to be really as good as it can be, and then at the right time put it out. And I think that's a good way to go.
Another thing that Tom said to me one day, and I don't remember what we were. It wasn't like I was hanging out with Tom all the time, but he said something to me. I was talking about a young band that was in another room while he was here working, and he said, "Oh, what are they doing?" And I said, "Oh, it's a demo. You know, it's a producer developing this artist." And he goes, "You know, if it wasn't for the people that I worked with and I started that actually took the time to develop my band and to give us that chance, you know, and it doesn't happen as much as it should, and it doesn't happen that much anymore, where an A&R person or even a producer will spend the time to develop an artist. Everybody's looking for the new TikTok craze or this or that, and they kind of want it to, and I get it's always been about followers, fan base. Social media is just another version of that. But I think it's really important, and it needs to be said, if you're listening to this and there's a band that you believe in, find a way with your band or find someone who believes in you, who will do those first demos, who can help you get it out there and help you get it listened to. And Tom said that if it hadn't been for those people, what was his manager's name when he first started out? British guy. I can't remember shit anymore.
Elliot Roberts.
Pre-Elliot Roberts. This was his early when he was Mudcrutch. The label.
The producer was Denny Cordell.
Denny Cordell.
Yeah, he was the producer of the original, of the first two Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers albums.
And I think he sort of helped. Tom said, I believe, I could be wrong, said he sort of helped develop and spent some time nurturing.
Yes.
From Mudcrutch to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
He really let them get into the studio and learn.
Yeah.
And mess around. And he was one of those guys who was really into developing that talent before putting it out. The thing is, this is what I kind of tell people who are trying to get into the business these days. It's not the same as when I got into the business, because there was 80 studios in LA or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there's not that anymore.
Yeah, this is a special place.
What you can do is you can pretty much on a laptop get a really good recording system going, and you can find a band and find find somebody and record them.
Yeah.
And do
your best.
Do your best and work on that. I mean, you look at the classic stories like The Doors.
Yeah.
They were just camped out in this place in Venice for a year.
Yeah.
Just working on their stuff before they even went into a studio.
And then if you get a chance to come into a place like East West, I'll give you a good deal, even if it's just to do drums.
Exactly.
Or something like that. Once you're ready.
Well, the thing is, you can use the technology right now to develop your ideas and develop yourself.
Artist empowerment.
Exactly.
That's what
You've got it right now. The barrier to entry before then, you had to have a 24-track machine or whatever.
Yeah.
Now you don't. So you can get your act together and then come visit Candace.
If you can. Yeah.
And but you can nail it because you already have you have your stuff figured out.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, as a studio manager, we don't, I always say to people, I'm like, don't, have it be well rehearsed. I still deal with people that are starting a freshman effort a lot, and you never know who that, the Beatles made a first record, Tom made a first record, you made a first record. And I'm like, look, don't sell yourself short, but be rehearsed. Try not to write in the studio because it's expensive and you want to, but I mean, you would think it would be the opposite for me. I'd be like, yeah, fuck off, waste time, write in the studio, spend more money. Right. But honestly, I don't feel that way. I feel like, no, make use of the time in this acoustic space, because these places, like Ryan said, it's special. Yes, you can go and do everything at your house and God bless. God bless, you can do that.
Right.
But don't forget these special places,
This is one of the sacred temples.
Right.
It is one of the sacred temples of music. I mean, this room that we are sitting in. I know, awesome. I mean, what? Beach Boys? I mean, what? You name it.
Studio 2. Well, Studio 2, the room we're in now, what it really was famous for in the 70s was all the TV themes. So it was like F Troop, I Dream of Jeannie, all the music for the Monkees was recorded here. All the music. What? Batman? Yeah, Batman. Hawaii Five-0. Yeah. And also all the music for the Partridge Family.
Can you sing?
I cannot.
Can you go?
Batman.
Okay.
Da, 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 da. Batman.
Okay, get right. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Batman. That was flat. Sorry.
No, that's good. No, see, that's it's a major second. That's what makes Batman. By the way, Taxman was written after Batman.
That's funny. Oh, for the Beatles?
Yes, and I just read this book. I'm reading biographies of all the Beatles, and
dude, I'm reading the Glenn Johns book right now.
Oh, he's
killer.
It's a great book.
I know, it's good.
But yeah, they actually, the George had heard Batman and thought it was really cool to say
funny.
Taxman. Yeah.
But for it was TV themes and stuff like that. But then obviously I came here in '98 and all I can think about is Tom Petty because I'm with Ryan and Tom's did a lot of stuff in this room. But we did, God, I've been having such a, you could look at oh yeah, that's right. We did 3, thank you. We did 3 Audio Slave records. We did Bonnie Raitt, Nick of Time. Whitney Houston sang I Will Always Love You in this room, not Studio 1. Yeah. right there. Yeah, in this room. A lot of people think it would be Studio 1, the big room, but it was this room. I Will Always Love. So yeah. Blessed. Thank you, Doug Rogers, my boss, who lets me be here. Thank you, Nader, my videographer. Thank you to Keith, Trusty Steed. Ryan, I think we're going to wrap it up, and I'm just so grateful to you for taking the time and being on Trade Secrets. I'm just stoked. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
It's so fun. It's so easy talking to you because we do this all the time anyway.
It's super fun to talk to. I know someone wrote in on or I don't know, it was a criticism of the podcast, and they said, well, she interrupts, and I'm like, it's my fucking podcast, okay? I can do what I want, okay? That's how we have witty repartee, okay?
Exactly. But remember, whatever she does, she always does it high tone.
So thank you so much for being here, and that's it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.